Hi, friends. I want to bring us back to First Peter this evening, or whatever time you're watching this, I suppose. We're getting towards the end of First Peter. We're in chapter 5 now, and I'm looking at verses 5, 6, and 7. And as I come to these verses, I'm noticing that there is Peter mentions a characteristic of godliness, maybe the chief characteristic of godliness in this passage. Can you guess what it would be? Maybe just off the top of your head. Think about 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 5, 6, and 7. One of the passages he quotes from Proverbs 3, verse 34. I'll tell you what it is. The characteristic of godliness that he mentions is humility. It's humility. Now, as I've kind of thought and processed through the characteristic of humility, what comes to mind is that we never really arrive at being humble. In fact, if you think about it, humility is one of those things that just about the time you think you've arrived at being humble, you've really probably arrived at the opposite of humility, which would be pride. And that's more the chief characteristic of sin than the chief characteristic of godliness. So for me, I've always just kind of thought any kind of teaching or writing on humility always just seems a bit strange for me. Yet here comes Peter, 1 Peter chapter 5. Clothe yourselves with humility. God gives grace to the humble. Humble yourselves, therefore. And I suppose if there's anyone who can exhort me or who can exhort you on being humble, it's the Apostle Peter under the guidance of the Holy Spirit. And I think what Peter does, I think he not only sets this up as the chief characteristic of godliness, I think what he does is he sets this up as sort of this characteristic cornerstone in the life of those who would imagine living without or beyond anxiety. Peter says, humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that he may lift you up in due time. And then he says, cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. Now, I think we talk about this plenty. We quote it even more probably, this idea of not worrying and giving God our troubles and our anxieties and things like that. But I think the reality is, if we're honest with ourselves, truth be told, we all by nature tend to want to kind of muscle through our anxious moments and be able to say that we did it our way or we did it in our own strength. And I think what Peter's saying is only the truly humble folks will own the reality that we cannot live these lives on our own. We cannot work through our anxious moments, our suffering moments, our worries on our own. We need God. We need the Father to cast those things upon because he cares for us. Peter says the reason we do this is because he cares for you intimately, deeply, passionately. God, the Father, cares for you, which I think is critical to know. And the only way we're going to really get that is if we humble ourselves before him. If we're humble enough to say, I can't do this on my own. I need you, God. Take this anxious moment from me so that I might live for your glory. And I want to encourage you in that right now in this season to cast your anxieties on God because he cares for you, but do it out of humility that you can't do this on your own. Okay? Thanks for listening to these things. We love you guys. Take care.